All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, Emily. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Happy Friday. Yeah, I'm really excited to welcome you to this webinar on summer programming. My name is Ayala, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. I'm one of the directors of program at the California School Age Consortium, which is a statewide intermediary based in California. My background's in after school, and my work at CalSAC is really focused on supporting out-of-school time agencies with building the adult capacity in their programs. I'd also like to introduce my colleague Diana, who's going to be running tech on this call. It'll be moderating the chat. So send her a message if you're having issues with something and she'll help you out. If you're just joining, you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can share your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from. Small housekeeping things before we start. I want to remind you that we're recording, so make any adjustments if needed. We have 4 panelists joining us today and about 4 questions that we want to get through during our webinar. I'll also be soliciting some of your experiences and really wanting to know, about the expertise and experience in the room and your insights during this panel. So I'll be asking you some questions to share in the chat box as we go along. And after the panel, we'll open up to questions and answers. We'll end at the very latest at 11:30 and possibly before, just depending how it goes. So in terms of the purpose of this conversation, I want to give you a framing of what we're hoping to get out of today's chat. After, it's been over a year of young people learning in somewhat isolated ways. Young people are just starting to return to school in most districts around the country, either face-to-face or in a hybrid model. And this fall, likely many youth are returning to school full-time. So summer programs, which are starting soon, will be an important gateway to returning to school, building more towards healing after a year of, more than a year of the pandemic. So purpose of this webinar is like, how should we be thinking about summer programs as a gateway into the fall? What do youth need from their summer program experiences? How will this year's summer programming be different from past years? So we really want to support practitioners to address the need for social emotional learning practices and, move away from the rhetoric of like just focusing on academics and what's being called learning loss. So we really want to hear from our speakers and those of you who are joining us today about, just what young people have experienced last year, thinking about what they need and strategies to address them. So I'm very excited to introduce to you our 4 panelists. We have Autrilla Gillis, who's the Director of Expanded Learning at ISANA Academies in Los Angeles, California. We have Rebecca Fabiano, who's the president and founder of FAB Youth Philly and the Play Captain Initiative. Selekha Ramos is the director of bilingual programs with Mighty Writers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Aaron Dworkin, who's the CEO of the National Summer Learning Association. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's start by considering how youth and their families experienced the last year. How might our youth be showing up in our summer programs? The first person to answer this question will be Selekha, but I also want to encourage participants to respond to this question in the chat as well. And we'll drop that question to the chat box so you can see it. But Selekha, go ahead and get us started.
Yeah. So this past year, I think it has been very difficult for all students, but we get to see a different side in the after-school programs, just because we don't only focus on subjects, we also offer programs that have more of a holistic approach with distribution. So we see families in the afternoon, we see families with little babies and with teenage kids, and they talk to us. So we really have the privilege, I guess, to have those conversations with families. And this last year, I mean, besides the terrible virus and, tragedies that can be related to that in families, we also feel that, especially in our communities, there was a lot of unemployment, a lot of people in those communities working in restaurants in that neighborhood, for example, lost their jobs. So there was really an increased need of just covering those basic needs. We always say you can't write if you're hungry. So the first thing is really cover those needs that are really the most basic: food, clothing, diapers. So we give those out at distribution, and that's something we didn't do before. So we really reacted to those needs coming through the pandemic, through the virus. But also this huge disconnect that some families have to the technology that is used with virtual school. So families not having computers. And then, of course, even though they can get it from the school, there's a whole process that they have to go through. So they need really support with every step in the way to get those resources they need to even be able to attend virtual school. So there was a lot of struggle with that, a lot of struggle with, the conditions maybe of homeschooling in that sense, having maybe 5 kids and one phone that has to function for all 5 kids. So I think a lot of those families have fallen through the cracks. Like some kids have not been able to join school or not been able to print out materials or many of those things. So I think there was a huge shift in the mission of the organization to address those new needs that came through the pandemic. That's just talking about basic, being hungry, not being able to pay rent, not being able to have a computer to join the classes. But of course, there's this whole field of, like you said, social emotional needs, and the struggles that some kids are going through. And our programs also have always had that mindfulness element, but it was always just kind of like nice, part of what we do. And that has really been our focus. We've built several mindful meetups where the program itself, it's not only about writing, it's just to get those kids connected to each other in a program. So that means that kids of a similar age can meet there, can really build community, find the support they need, even though they're isolated at home, maybe, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, where, the little ones, we have the first meetup for 7-year-olds, 7 to 10-year-olds. So those 7-year-olds that were just at home, not being able to find new friends, not being able to talk about their feelings, we really make that space there for them to be able to share, to get to connected to kids their age, but also get that emotional support that is age appropriate. So we have mindful meetups for all ages. We've also restarted our tutoring program, so really rethinking what is a tutor. It's not just academics, it's really more setting goals with the student, getting them connected. That can also be the person that helps the family with Zoom, understanding all these new tools. And I think there's like a lot of need for that. So people that really support the family in all the fields that have been affected by the pandemic, not just academics, which is a big field too, but all of them.
Great, thanks, Selekha. Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking to the way that your organization was responsive to the needs of the basic needs of families and integrating that into your normal programming. Appreciate you highlighting that. I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca to respond as well.
Sure. So what we're learning from the young people in our after school program, young people are definitely feeling a little tentative about coming back in person. And we're sort of seeing like a mix of young people who are feeling tentative, cautious, and then another group of young people who are feeling very excited to reconnect and really craving an opportunity to connect with others. In Philadelphia, we've had an unprecedented amount of violence in our city this past 5 months. And so I'm hearing from young people, not only are they sort of reflecting on the past year and feeling disconnected from their peers and their support systems, specifically related to school, they're also feeling really worried about being in public spaces this summer. And so there's this balance between really wanting to connect and really wanting to have sort of revisit those deep relationships they had with their after school program peers and staff, but I think also a real concern about their own safety. I had a group of young people who had a chance to testify in front of City Hall recently, and they're very concerned about their own and their peers' mental well-being. And so looking to us to provide additional supports and resources around mental wellness, and thinking about ways that they can both take care of themselves, but they're also looking, how can I take care of my peers? How can I support my peers? So we're currently interviewing young people for our summer job position. And a lot of them are talking about how they're like ready to give back. They're ready to be in the neighborhood. So we definitely see this sort of mixed bag of young people who are like, I'm not so sure, but I know that I need this and I know that I want it. not sure how it's going to feel. And then another group of young people who are like, I'm ready. I want to reconnect with my neighbors, my friends, my after school folks. So thinking about the summer as an opportunity, maybe to go slow, to re-engage really at the core around relationships, really at the core that everyone's going to show up in different ways. Some young people, their behavior may not always match what they're telling us. And so being curious, being empathetic, and also just not relying on, I'm not just relying on my own staff to understand that. We're partnering with a variety of other agencies and stakeholders to make sure that the young people's needs are being met.
Still on mute. Thanks for that, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm hearing you speak to like that tension between the tentativeness and the excitement and the ready to engage and focus on relationships with the, you know, with the need for young people also just have time to like come into it slowly and process everything. And I'm seeing that coming up in the chat as well, like both, you know, the need for normalcy, but also like, you know, and the relief and the fear of the past year. And yeah, I mean, you started to speak about it, Rebecca, and you're also sort of slated to start us off with the next question. So I thought maybe we just continue with you. But the next question that I wanted to ask is, how can summer programming serve as a gateway for returning to school full-time in the fall? And you started to speak to it, but I'm wondering if you could flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I really wish that those organizations, the schools that are only have 5 or 6 weeks left of school, would really prioritize relationship building and joy and play, and like, what does it mean to be in community? How do we want community to be different? What have we learned in the last year? And so I wish that schools, rather than expanding solely their focus on academics, would also really think about how are we doing the bridge with relationship building? Are we doing peer mentoring? Are we finding adult mentors to work with young people? How are young people connecting with community members through service projects? So I feel like this summer is really an opportunity, one, for young people to connect to meaningful relationships, to think about how to be productive in a way that speaks to their strengths and makes them feel connected to others. And I'm just about to put in the chat an article from Bloomberg City Lab where they've called the summer of 2021 the summer of play. That speaks to me in particular because of the work we do around play, but I think it's also something for us to think about. How are we helping young people experience joy? How are we helping young people experience playfulness and sort of reconnecting with not only with other people, but with themselves, their bodies, their neighborhood. So I would just really encourage us to think about relationship, again, whether that's from within our organization or connecting young people to peers and other organizations. I feel like young people sort of need the practice of how to be in relationship with others, how to understand what's expected of them in various settings and situations, and how to manage their own emotions or how they're showing up. And I think this summer is a really good way for young people to do that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rebecca. That's really clear. I'd like to pass over to Autrilla. Like, what are you thinking about in terms of summer programming?
With Rebecca, I feel like we've been meeting a lot as an organization to figure out what summer programming looks like and how the different departments within our district can come together to collaborate to make the summer experience one that does touch on learning, but one that also presents a social opportunity for students to really come together in ways. And so what it's been is expanded learning, collaborating with pupil services to make sure that SEL needs are being met, collaborating with our visual and performing arts departments to really give students a summer experience that's a learning experience, but an experience that is fun and engaging. It's so important for us that, like Rebecca said, they practice those social skills because they're going from being in a house with just their immediate family to transitioning back to a campus full of students that they haven't seen, right? Some students that they got along with when they left, a lot of students that they didn't get along with when they left. I was walking through a campus yesterday and a student saw me and came running out, Miss Gillis, this student's making me feel uncomfortable. And so it's practicing those skills. Okay, well, what can you do? But if you came and told me, and I'm happy you did, but let's talk through it. And so what are some things that you can do to sort of tune that out or to remove yourself from the situation so that it doesn't escalate? And I feel like those are a lot of the things that we need to practice over the summer. And so being very, very deliberate and in providing those opportunities, role play opportunities, opportunities that allow students to collaborate together rather than work individually. Excuse me. So anything and everything that we can do to provide collaboration opportunities for students so that they get to practice those skills again and they're ready. Because like Selekha said it too, you know, coming back in, they're nervous, they're scared, they're apprehensive, everything looks different. Everything looks different. It's a totally new world. And so with all of that fear and all of that anxiety, the social piece should be the easy piece for them. And if we can help front load that, then we're doing our job.
Thanks for that, Autrilla. Aaron, I want to call you in to contribute your thoughts on summer's a bridge to fall.
Well, 100%. First of all, I just want to say thank you for including me. I'm really honored. Thank you, CalSAC. Thank you, Sam Piha, who's on this call, who's been a mentor and leader to me and our whole field for many years. It's great to be with you, Sam. And listen, everyone who's on this call is doing the real work and doing, you know, I would say I'm getting further removed. I'm with NSLA, we're an intermediary, we're national. We try and support programs, school districts, nonprofits, government youth serving agencies, and even like for-profit and corporate partners. And I think a couple quick things. One, it's important to remember that summer learning feels different for different kids at different ages. So what you do for elementary school kids, high school students are doing summer youth employment. That's very different. And COVID has been traumatic. We know all this and everyone's been very eloquent in describing, right? COVID been hard for everyone, but harder for some, and especially low income and communities of color have been disproportionately bearing the brunt in many ways. And so again, this focus on social emotional learning. So there's real trauma. So I just, you know, all of you were in the choir here, but I talk to people who are like, great, let's like run back to school. And like, hey, whoa, you know, like you may have lost your parent, you may have lost your grandmother, your mother may have lost her job because she worked in a restaurant and like has been unemployed and all. Like we need to like, and Rebecca and everyone was talking about this. So the line I always like subscribe to is like connection before content. We have to build relationships. If you want to talk about math and reading, great, but like we're gonna have to like meet young people where they are, right? So that I'm seeing that, and this, you know, sometimes people are talking about we're obviously going to use the summer to get people ready for school. There's a chance to reacclimate, catch up, and then get, you know, just get used to being with your peers, with adults again, and getting excited for school, right? We don't want to just make this like a negative thing. And I think it's worth, if I may, just say 10 seconds on the distinction between, and we have to remind people, it's worth saying, I believe, the differences between summer school and summer learning. There's a reason my organization is called Summer Learning Association, not the Summer School Association. So let's just go back. This is not based on any evidence. This is just historical generalizations of the last 150 years. Summer school has historically been a punishment, been mandatory, been only for a few students who have to go. It's been remedial. You're only catching up. You know, if you failed math, you have to go do that same class. It only takes place within the four walls of the school building. And you know, again, and it's not comprehensive, and usually it's just adult driven. Whereas summer learning is the opposite of everything I just said, right? It's not just remedial, it's like you get to now study music and study something new or take some other class that isn't offered. It's not boring and disengaging. We want this to be so engaging. In fact, so engaging that you can make it voluntary and everyone wants to come. You don't just have to like mandate people to come, right? And if you look at Boston as an example, and there are lots of others, in Boston, they call use the city as a classroom. I know in the Bay Area, they have community learning hubs and all this. It's like they have certified teachers working at the zoo, at the museum. Summer learning is taking place everywhere. It's not only school district. And the reason I bring this up is because all of you as leaders and connectors, our school districts, I'm hearing teachers, deservedly so, are exhausted. Even if you pay them double, they don't want to work in the summer program. Okay, it's hard to teach kids on Zoom. And then it's not that students haven't learned nothing, right? There's been real learning. It's not as optimal as we want. So all this is pointing to what we all care about, which is about partnerships. And there for a long time, some districts have felt like, hey, we could do this all by ourselves. Even if they felt that way during COVID, you can't bring 25 students into a classroom, even if you wanted to. It's safer and better to be outside and healthier, right? So we need our districts to be working with our parks and rec and our libraries and our out of school time, after school nonprofit programs and all this. And my point is, everybody wants to help. Some people are exhausted. Some people are chomping at the bit. some people didn't get to serve their students during the year, and lots of them can't wait to work. And so Rebecca's point about like the creative staffing opportunities we have. So I think the last thing I'll say on this is that we have federal money that I think we've all earned and worked hard to secure, that is in addition to our typical 21st century or other funding sources, for the next 3 years. So we will do our best this summer to do what we can, and reconnect is important, but we have the next 3 years additional funding, and in California you have more, I know. So to figure out how to leverage and to build our summer plans into our year-round planning, and to be strategic and be thoughtful. I care a lot about this summer, of course, as much as anyone, but I really care about 2022 and next summer, because that's when we'll have the time and these excuses. We have a lot of built-in excuses why this summer can't work as well as we want. And I think we know them for lots of reasons, and we'll do our best to bypass them. But how can we lay the groundwork this summer, get students ready for school, and then really build our next summer and the summer after? As this is not just a COVID emergency investment. We want this to be what happens all year round. We want all young people in America to access and afford great summer experiences, not just an emergency. So the onus is going to be on us to do a good enough job that everyone in America is convinced to keep this investment going.
Well, thanks for that, Aaron. I really appreciate you speaking to like this summer not needing to be like the end all be all, like serving young people with integrity, but it's like it's a way to lay the groundwork for future summers and changing the framework of how we think about summer learning, right? And to your point, not that it's not summer school, but it's really like the heart of out of school time, like the other panelists spoke to, you know, like centering relationships, centering joy, centering connections, bringing in outside partners, right? It's like this is what you all do well in the out of school time. I mean, I'll say we like do well in the out of school time community. And, you know, the next question I have really dovetails really nicely into where you left off, Aaron. So I'm just gonna have you continue before passing off to the next panelist. But it's kind of like this age-old tension in after school and out of school time and summer learning is like, you know, the message coming down of like kids are behind, right? Like there's unfinished learning here. We have to be attentive to that with the needs for social emotional learning, for connection, for play, for recognizing the realities of the last year. How do you think about balancing those two needs? Not necessarily putting like, you know, one over the other, but
Sure. Well, two things. One, I think we should take some comfort in that I don't know if any of you have read a speech or seen our new U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who was in Connecticut and was a teacher, was a principal. He speaks about summer and out of school time the way we all speak about it. He cares. So now this is very different than the Trump administration. But I will just tell you, the out of school time field has never had a champion who cares more about a whole child education, and at least is speaking to it and putting. So when he says, I want every young person in America to have as much fun and joy and get all these arts and health and fitness and everything, and, you know, extracurricular. So I normally I would say we're fighting that battle, but it feels like we have some allies here and they're putting billions of dollars into it. So for the moment, we have convinced the people in power that our model of how we approach things is correct. So I think that's great. But I do find, and a lot of people call me up and they say, oh, should we focus more on academics or focus more on social emotional learning? And I don't want to be too snarky, but in my mind, I'm like thinking like, this is a dumb question. It's a waste of time. The real question, you know, it's dumb because young people need all of it. Well, you know, like as we keep saying. And by the way, there's lots of research to show that if you do physical activity and you get to play, you do better academically. If you get exposed to the arts and you're in writing programs and poetry, you're going to do better academics. All of a sudden, everything makes sense. And now you want to go to the program, you care. And, you know, as opposed to, or compared to a program that's 8 hours of academics only. The students who do all of it do better academically than the students who are only in academics. You know, and it's kind of, you know, hard for people to grasp, but it makes sense. The other two things that we also should mention here is about what summer is, which is summer is a metaphor in our world for two things: inequity and opportunity. If young people are out of school between January and March, we be caring about that time. But this is the most unequal time in education for young people. Middle and upper middle class families who have resources are spending, without blinking and thinking, thousands of dollars, you know, to have great experiences for their kids. And we know that young people that we're serving can't access, can't afford those things. The best example, by the way, is the unpaid summer internship. The most, horrible, unfair, unjust educational experience there is. So I'll just say, so I think we have allies. I think people understand our comprehensiveness, but there is so much dot connecting that needs to happen locally that like sadly just doesn't. And you're the leaders on the ground who could do it, but I have library systems who are like, we're here, we're ready, please tell us what to do. And like no one calls them. And the Parks and Rec is like, we're here, we got fields, we're ready. No. And the district's not talking to them. So it's gonna take our out of school time leaders to kind of bring everyone together to make sure all these experiences get delivered the way they need to.
Great, thank you, Aaron. We're going to pass it over to Selekha to speak to us a little bit about how your organization is thinking about, like, what strategies are you using to balance those needs?
Yeah, so I just want to say something about the whole child approach. And I think we all, also the schools and, everything related to learning has learned a lot from the last year, that you can't just focus on academics. And I think just this pandemic year has made it very clear for every institution that we need to start connecting the dots, and we start, to offer holistic programs that really, like I said, community is a big part of it. Experiences is the bottom line. We don't learn from theory, we learn from experience. So every learning experience is something productive, even if the academic part of it isn't overwhelming. And I think we just need to rethink that. Us in the after school programs, the schools are rethinking that too, and being more project-based in our learning and less about what we teach and, focus more on what's learned. I think that shift is happening just because it has become so clear when the kids are on their own, like, what are they even learning? Like this disconnect, this physical disconnect has just made clear that there is a disconnect in the first place, to reaching the kids and motivate them. And anything that you don't want to learn, you don't learn, even if you're sitting in the classroom for 8 hours, right? So I think that, like I said, every program has to have a focus on building relationships, on addressing social emotional needs, but also to really see where every student is and the metrics, how that's measured. I think that needs to change as well, because if a student doesn't read at grade level, then they're not at the level, and they have to keep going, and they're going to fall behind more and more. So really a more individual approach to the child's learning, through project-based learning, through having mentors, through having a support system in the school that's not just teachers. I think all of that needs to happen, and hopefully will happen in the next year or so. But the summer is going to be the first time we get to actually have in-person experiences with our kids. It's the first summer where that's going to happen. Last summer was very difficult. I don't know about other states and organizations, but for us, we didn't have any summer learning. So the programs have just to change, and the curriculum and the way we focus, on what kind of learning is happening, and it's not just academic and not just cognitive learning.
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes, I was just going to ask you, Rebecca, what can you add?
Well, one of the things that John said was access, and I think that that's so important. And so we were so deliberate over the course of the last year with our virtual programming and providing access to our students, because in a world where everyone's in front of the computer, what better opportunity to bring live virtual field trips for students to experience things that they haven't experienced before. And so I do think that with summer programming, there needs to be a total collaboration between day school and between out of school, so that everyone's working together to make learning fun. And so one of the things that we are doing at ISANA is that the expanded learning department is doing a virtual summer program. And then of course there's on-site summer school, Aaron. But what we're doing is we're theming each week out. And so each week is an opportunity for students to engage in a particular theme in the classroom after school with all of the enrichment activities, and it will culminate with a field trip. So yes, you're still learning, it's still math, it's still English, but here's this theme. So this week, everything is about space. And so in any activity that you're in, even if you're in a PE class in the afternoon, we're doing space jumps and we're doing moon bounces. And so you're still learning, but everything is themed and it's fun, and it all links up together, because like you said, our families, they don't have access to the things that other families have access to. Their communities don't have access to the resources and the programs that would otherwise be available in different communities. So I think it really is a partnership of everyone working together. We're fortunate at ISANA that everybody has a seat at the table. And so we're not compartmentalized, or it's like, oh, we wonder what they're doing over there. Everyone's working together for the benefit of the students. And so I think it's about really forcing your way into those conversations and really advocating for what expanded learning has to offer and what you can bring to the table, because we know that we have amazing staff and our teams are ready and willing to jump in there and help. And sometimes we can see things from a different perspective because we're not only focused on standard-based instruction, we're focused on the whole child. And so I would encourage everyone on the call to really just push your way into those conversations and get that seat at the table so that you can bring a spin on what is traditionally done.
Can I follow that up? And I would also say, if there isn't a seat at the table, make your own table. So find people who are champions and peers and who want to try it and test an idea. We always try to find trusted partners who are willing to make mistakes with us and who are going to give us grace when we don't get it right the first time, and we extend that as well. So like, find someone who's been wanting to try a field trip to the art museum using the science teacher's curriculum. Like, find that person and try it. I also think funders tend to be more willing to fund something that is tangible as opposed to an idea. So if you could go back and say, we tried this in summer 2021, we want to expand for summer 2022, here's what we learned, here's how we did it. So I think, I fight a lot with this desire to be at the table, but I also find once I get at the table, it's the wrong conversation. I actually don't want to be involved in that. I want to find the people who want to have the same conversation. So sort of building a little bit from what you were saying. I also, in my fantasy world, if I ran middle school programming, all we would do is field trips. Exposure, 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 exposure at the middle school level. That's all we would do is field trips. And at the high school, we primarily work with high school age youth, and we do workforce development. But our workforce development programming is based on this concept of playful learning. So our teenagers here in Philadelphia are trained kind of like camp counselors, and we place them on neighborhood streets called play streets. They serve as a summer meal program, but the teens are there to lead playful learning activities. There are 6 C's of playful learning. So while the teens think they're leading activities that get the children to learn confidence, collaboration, communication, and so on, they're actually really learning those things. And so they're like developing these 21st century skills, but they're also modeling them for younger kids, and younger kids are learning. We do read aloud. We do relay races with math challenges, but our teens have to come up with those things. So there's critical thinking that's involved. And so going back to your point, Aaron, about like learning doesn't have to be in a classroom. It doesn't have to be, punitive. It can happen in a variety of ways. I would also say this last idea is that what I love about OST, and especially summer, is that sense of time is totally different. We are not stuck like a classroom teacher to 40 minutes of instruction. We really can be creative in how we spend our time, who we spend it with, how are we extending resources to young people and their families, connecting them to people they may not think they have access to. Summer is this incredible, and I think after school, frankly, that's why I left the traditional classroom, because after school allows us to really stretch our creativity and not be constrained by some of the things that are these artificial barriers: time, resources, partnership. I don't have to go to the principal or the school district to get permission. I just go and say, hey, do you want to try this? And we get to do it. So those are sort of like 3 little ideas that we're percolating as folks were talking.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I mean, I want to join all of your programs. Like, I think that you're really speaking to like the creativity and like the great, like the expansiveness of like what can be done in this time, and also that it's like kind of like we talked about in the last question, like laying the groundwork and like building and like trying out and like seeing what works. I mean, one of the main themes that I really heard elevated in all 4 of your responses was like the need for partnerships, the need to bring people to the table, like the table that you're creating, right? But like knowing that so many organizations are like available and ready to do this work with you, and that we can't go at it alone, and like bringing in that collaboration, whether it's with the school day, like Autrilla was speaking about, of like doing the work in collaboration with school day teachers, or bringing in Parks and Rec, but kind of like the need to just build the ecosystem to make sense, to be able to address all the
May I jump in on just on this point? Because I think one of the things that we should take we should take pride in is I subscribe to Oprah Winfrey's definition of luck, which is, I think, preparation meets opportunity. And the truth is, the out of school time field for decades now has been preparing for this moment because we've created all this infrastructure, quality standards, training, intermediaries, research, all at conferences. We know what works. We know how to do it well. We have lots of evidence. And so when all of a sudden a crisis opportunity presented itself and it was like, quick, spend billions of dollars to help young people, well, who should we give it to? It was a justifiable decision, a quick decision to say, let's invest in the out of school time community. They can handle it. They're well prepared. And so I think that's something they wouldn't, if we didn't have all this of the last 25 years built up and ready to go, we wouldn't have just gotten this big investment. But again, the same way, I just kind of also want to make this pivot to, again, underscore the points Rebecca and everyone's been saying, but some of this is about appealing to other people's self-interest. Like, we know why we need to do the work and why our work is good and why young people should be in our programs. To get other people to buy in, which they are, but if we want to keep it going, to appeal to their self-interest. So when we talk about the chance for young people to improve, I love this point about your staff also being educated, Rebecca, at the same time. Same with adult staff. Most professional development for teachers happens in the summer. Now, we should reframe, and depending on who you're talking to as you're trying to build your partnerships and expand your table, talk about how your summer program isn't just a chance for young people to improve, but for staff and teachers to improve their skills. And it's a form of professional development. Now, hey, I was going to spend, now your program seems expensive, but if you're going to train all my teachers in some way and get them ready for school year, well, now it's a deal. The same summer program is now a deal. Same with innovation. People, you want to test out new ideas, and we all want new ideas, but before what we pitch people is like, summer's the best time to innovate because you can work out the kinks. It's long enough to measure whether it works. And that way, you do it before you scale it school-wide, district-wide, statewide, like get some, and whether you like them or not, I could give you a million examples of full national nonprofits and schools that started out as summer. KIPP charter schools started out as a 6-week summer program. So lots of people, we just launched a summer innovation fellowship. We had, for leaders of color, we got 250 applicants in 2 weeks. All these people who had great ideas who want to do new programs. So that should be huge. And the last thing to also remember that's unique to summer, and this goes back to Rebecca's point about the flexibility of time. We have a lot of unlikely allies, people you never would see in the out of school time or education space, who never would say that their priority is to work with kids or educate young people. They run summer programs for young people. For example, the NIH, I live near it, that's why I could talk about it, where Dr. Fauci sits. They are trying to come up with a cure for COVID. They run a gigantic program for 1,000 low-income teenagers to teach them how to be doctors every summer. So I didn't know this. They are running a summer learning program. By the way, they could use all our help. They have they know the content. They don't know how to have a warm welcome. They could go through some Weichert Center training on this. But it's like, and it turns out they're not alone. Every medical school and every hospital is running a summer program for teenagers to teach them how to be doctors. I didn't know this. They didn't know each other. But I just tell you, like, these are people that are in our space that would benefit from all our training and our resources and your partnerships. And corporations who, again, are during the year or doing anything with young people are running Apple computers running coding camps for students, Microsoft, all this stuff. So people jumped in, and I think it's up to us to be able to help, curate some of these resources and opportunities and point and connect the dots between the families who need them and the folks who want to provide.
Aaron, I think we also have an opportunity to help inform folks who are running summer programs, especially talking about your unpaid internship as one of the most inequitable things that happens. It's an opportunity to go back and educate folks about why paid internships are so important and who typically has access to them and who doesn't, and how that creates an incredible imbalance inside of our organizations and inside of our companies. Because if I have my foot in the door and I show up halfway decent, folks are like, oh, it's the white privilege potential label that I get. Rebecca was here, she showed up, she was here for the summer, she's got potential. Now she's got a pathway inside of our organization and now inside of our field. And that doesn't exist for families Black, white, Latino, if you're poor and you have to work, you can't take a year off or do an unpaid internship. And so it's also our chance to go back and say, that's a great idea, and you need to do it this way, and here's why.
100%. I'll just quickly just give it the worst example of that, or best example that we're trying to change, is to get hired to work for your congressman or U.S. senator. You have to come to Washington, D.C. You have to be able to do an unpaid internship, even if they pay you minimum wage. Who could afford to fly to DC? Who could afford an apartment? Who could afford suits? And as a result, I think 75 to 80% of people who then get hired working for their member of Congress are like white middle class people, because this entry point doesn't allow itself to reflect America. And so we're doing our little part. I'm paying for 4 of our alumni of award-winning programs. I'm paying $10,000 per student to come and pay all their expenses to come to DC this summer, and setting them up with these internships. And all these offices, they say, we would hire all these great people, but we can't pay their expenses. So it's just an example. And then think about who gets to be in policy decisions and who will make the laws that affect all of us if we can't kind of change these pipelines. So it's just you're underscoring your point. It's just, that's one place. If you have a donor who wants to help, that's one place you could do something too.
Yeah, speaking of making your own table, right? It's like we need to like throw away the traditional tables and really have a hand in like who we're bringing in. I appreciate you all for sharing that and just moving it kind of into a dialogue. I want to highlight just the strategies that came up from those past few minutes, but I heard, appealing to other people's interests, like looking outside of who you might think normally would be running summer programs, like appealing to their interests, like really bringing in some of the youth development principles that like our school or summer programs like really excel in. I heard the need to sort of market and highlight that this is adult professional development, and also highlight that a lot of what you can do in the summer is like a testing ground. It can pilot before something really expands. And then tangentially as well, like advocating for paid internships, and really like thinking about like systemic changes that we can make around who gets what opportunities. That's a lot of strategies that you all named. I want to open it up for question and answer, and then panelists, I'll still have you have a chance to sort of give your closing thoughts, your call to action. I want to let you know that that's coming. In terms of question and answers, a couple ways we can do it. You can drop your question into the chat box if you'd prefer, or you can, electronically raise your hand. You can take, we're a relatively small group. You could take yourself off mute if you want and ask a question, but we have some time for a Q&A. Would love to hear from you all. Maybe you heard what you were hoping to hear when you signed up for this webinar. Are there any questions? Is there anything you want to ask of any of the panelists here? Because otherwise we can move into closing thoughts, call to action. All right. If you think of something, put in the chat box. But in the meantime, panelists, like what would you want to leave folks with? Like what's your, if you could distill for folks the importance, not the importance of summer, I feel like everyone knows that, but like kind of like your suggestion of maybe like one main thing to focus on, like maybe one thing to keep front time. Oh, we have a question. So you have time to think about that, panelists. From Andrea, what are some suggestions that you have for summer programs or out of school time programs that work with students / campers short term, 1 to 3 weeks, to support their participants? So really thinking about short term opportunities.
I think any opportunity that you can infuse in the short term for collaboration we used to do an international summer camp where students would rotate in from China, and they would only be here for 2 weeks at a time. But the bond that we were able to create between our students and the international students just within that short period of time was amazing, but it was because everything was collaborative. So whether you were in the German class or the fashion class, everybody was intermingling, deliberate intermingling, because students start to establish their own little crew and then they don't necessarily venture out from that. So really encouraging them and setting a stage for that by changing the way that you do groupings each day so that it's sort of a forced collaboration. I think that that would be the key, just to make sure that everything that you're doing and to really drive spirit opportunities. We came up with this, well, the kids did, not me, this quirky chant that we would do, and they would just burst into this chant randomly. We would be having lunch or walking to the buses and someone would start it and everyone would finish it. So really think about like spirit and just things that you can do to make them feel like this is home. Like, I've been here forever. I know these people. This is my tribe. Anything that you can do to foster that spirit amongst your campers.
We run our programming is sort of like summer camp, and I've run summer camp, so I'd also be happy to chat offline. But building from that, this idea of being really deliberate is important. I've worked with young people over the course of a week, and they've been like, oh my God, we love each other. We're talking to people we never would have talked. How is this even possible? It must be magic. And I'm like, it's not magic. I planned for that. I knew this was going to happen because we did this activity first, then we did this next activity where you had to get to know each other and you built trust, right? So like, you don't do the human knot activity on the first day because no one wants to touch each other. You do that on the last day. So being like really deliberate, you can, very quickly build bonds and relationships. I think the other thing about summer camp, and I think also with after school, and especially as young people are sort of emerging back into our spaces, rituals and routines, sense of predictability, and a sense of celebration. So what can I predictably know is going to happen every day at 8 o'clock? And what are the ways that we are creating these rituals, whether it's the chant, we do a lot of call and response, whether it's songs, it's flagpole. But I think being intentional, you will get that magic at the end of the week. And that I think is really important.
Thanks, Rebecca. I actually laughed out loud when you said it's not magic. I made that happen. I feel like that is the life of a teacher, right? Like no one sees it. Like, anyway, so that struck a deep nerve for me. Thank you for saying that. Great. If there's any more questions, we'll jump in. But I want to turn over to panelists. You can unmute yourself when you're ready. Just because I think that's easier. But kind of like, what's your closing statement, and what would you call people to focus on?
So I think there are really two big fields that we need to focus on. And the first one is healing on all levels. We've talked about loss, financial loss of family members, just loss in general. But the other field is, I think, Autrilla, you said that, with bringing back the joy. So really focusing on community, on building relationships, and also reconnecting with our communities, because this year, being online, being virtual, you don't see your neighbors as much anymore. You don't have these everyday encounters that we used to have. So I think rebuilding that and re-inviting the families and just doing a lot of healing, but with this positive outlook, that we just want to bring the joy back and kind of rethink how we learn and rethink how we build our programs and what our focus really is. And that is to offer another way of learning in a less restricted way. And that really focuses on what the child needs and wants and how we can, give them the experiences back that they've been lacking in the virtual time. I think that's what we need to focus on. And I'm already looking forward to the summer camps as well. So just, and also just doing things spontaneously. I think we've done a lot of that, of just like, throwing out new ideas and making it work, never having done this before. And I think we need some of that courage in the next year to just try new things and, don't overthink it. Just put a whiteboard out in the park and let's go put up some chairs. I think we've been really resourceful in this last year and we should keep doing that.
Thanks, Selekha. Thanks for starting us off there. Appreciate that. Is there a panelist who'd be willing to answer a question before going into the closing statement, which is from Leora, and it says, what ideas do you suggest to encourage / train staff to cultivate those deliberate interactions amongst students?
I love to hear from Rebecca and Autrilla. Like anyone who's more working directly with students should speak first. So
I was gonna say, don't all answer at once.
I'll follow you, Autrilla. Go ahead.
Okay. I would say it has to be a part. So I never asked or expect my staff to do anything that I'm not doing, right? And so it's sort of that servant leadership. And so the same thing with students. You're not going to ask your students to do anything that you aren't doing. And so a lot of how students learn is by watching, right? They're always looking at you, they're always watching. And so asking staff to be deliberate just in how they carry themselves. My biggest thing over the years with my staff has been, if we're a healthy school and we're a healthy campus, when it's time for snack, don't pull out your hot Cheetos in front of the kids, because that's sort of counteractive to what we're saying and what we're doing here. And so I think really setting that tone. And so if the goal is for students to collaborate and be open with their feelings and to really process and demonstrate critical thinking, then how do you do that with staff? And one of the things that has really struck me over the last year, and I keep saying it every time I'm on one of these panels, is that I'm a bit of a control freak. And so it's usually a top down from the district. You guys are doing this, and this. Literally from my staff in my office, we were lesson planning for the entire district. This is a kinder plan. This is everything that you're doing for this week. But being in a virtual setting, we really had to completely take away the reins and allow our staff to develop that content and to show us, what they were made of. And I was amazed. I was amazed. Over the course of the last year has been some of the strongest programming that we've ever had. And so I think that your staff knows students more than you do. And so allowing them to plan deliberately, that's my biggest takeaway, is that allowing them to deliberately plan for the group of students that they deal with. And so from one classroom to the next, it's going to look completely different, but to trust your staff and know that, okay, I hired you for a reason. I've fed into you and I've developed you in a way that I think will allow you to lead. Now cultivate this group of students that you've been entrusted with. And then my takeaway is going to be to bring back the fun. And so when I think about summer as a child, summer was fun. I was in summer camp, even if I was just at home in my grandma's front yard. I didn't have a tablet. I wasn't glued to the TV because there was nothing on during the day. I was outside, I was playing with the neighborhood kids. And so I would say, bring back the fun. And so like Rebecca said, it's not magic. I did that. We need to be deliberate in it, but the students don't need to know that. And so I think that means sitting down and creating a list of goals. What are our goals at the end of the summer? What ultimately do we want to say that we accomplished? And then to work backwards. How do we get there? And so work backwards to bring back the fun. That's my takeaway. Right.
I just want you to know that I wrote joy down. So both of you speaking to joy and fun are on the top of my list. I also just want to add one more piece to what you said, Autrilla, about being deliberate and trusting your staff and so forth. I also think my experience as a trainer all these years is that if I want someone to go back and do something at their organization, they have to experience with me. I can't just say, here's a book of activities, go do them because I said they were good to do and they're effective, I promise. You have to actually do it. So we have rituals and routines that our staff experience so that they know what it feels like to do it and to plan it for ritual and routine. When I say you need to create a ritual, I can say it's like when we do this, and they've experienced it. So I think part of our staff training in working backwards is also designing our training to look and feel like you want their training of the young people to be, because when you embody it, you're more likely to go back and try it. So I would just say that as an additional piece around how do you get staff to be deliberate? They have to, I think, experience deliberateness and experience the expectations so that they can feel confident enough to do it. We are going to play all summer long. I'm craving the sounds of giggles. I'm craving the sounds and the way my teens swagger down the street. I'm craving the pushing and the poking and the ways they interact with each other. And so we are doing everything we can to create joy and just sort of reconnecting with our bodies and with each other in a very joyful, playful place. And I think play can be professional. So my adults are going to experience that too, and they're going to get comfortable modeling it and coaching it for our kids and for our teams.
Thank you. I'll jump in with a few kind of final thoughts. First of all, this has been really fun for me because it's great to be with real practitioners who are working directly with students. I get myself caught up in a lot of conversations with like policy research people who talk about kids, but they don't know any kids and they couldn't hang for 5 minutes with young people. So, there's a big disconnect on that. And I think it's important that we get everyone connecting on that point. But I will also just say, what is sad is we have so much knowledge and we know it works, as all of you could say, but there's still a lot of people who are getting some money to run programs and design them who think they're all by themselves and that they're first person in the history of the world to set up a program. And we have to get to them quick. And we have, and they're overwhelmed. They don't know who to call. All of you have all the answers. They don't have any. And we just got to not, punish them or yell at them. We just have to say, hey, we can help you. I think there's also an important point, and we don't need to dwell on this, but because we all know it. Also in the last year during COVID, a racial reckoning going on in this country. And it's been going on for hundreds of years, but has moved up onto the spotlight and the agenda for more people than normal, right? And I think our programs are a place to talk about that and maybe take action about that. And I think to train and our staff have been through this. And so I just think, and people don't always have a safe place and don't have the right words. They don't have the right context, but the conditions and the community you're building, ultimately all these programs are about building community. So if we're building community and modeling community, we're giving people a safe place and safe space to discuss this. I just want to put that into our trainings and put that into our curriculum. I would also say, and you could do it with creative staffing, so some of the questions we were getting about how do you build the rituals and the celebrations, all true, but youth voice. We don't have to make this up ourselves. I hope you have a youth advisory board. If you have older youth, let them plan half the activities. Let them tell you what they want to see, and then let them lead it and let them recruit people into the program. And much better for them to recruit their peers than 45-year-olds trying to grab 12-year-olds and get them to come. I mean, who does a 12-year-old want to listen to more? So we know that, but create opportunities and positions and a place for them to share their voice and their input. I think we're going to have to hold ourselves accountable for serving more students. I mean, this summer will be hard, but just on the metrics, we know quality is number one, but we also need to be able to reach more students. And if you want to know, are we successful? People are going to want to know, were we successful or not? And the question is, did you serve more people than last summer, or are you going to serve more people? Do you have a plan to serve more young people in 2022 than 2021 with this extra money? And we have to, as a field, somehow make that true. I believe. And there are more students who need us. So we need to be able to figure that out. And if that's a struggle, we can get you solutions and help to figure that out. And the last thing here is about making high quality programs that you yourself, this is a question I always would ask me and I tell anyone else to ask. Are you designing and creating a program that you yourself would pay money to put your own child in? If the answer is no, the program's not good enough. It's not good enough for your children, it's not good enough for all our children and any children. And let's just hold ourselves to that high standard. And that's what all young people deserve. And it can't be my kid gets to go to a program that's amazing, that costs this much and is wonderful. And then other kids, to no fault of their own, get some crumb kind of thing. And none of us want that. But as we're talking to our peers and our friends in districts and other settings that are designing programs, just keep reminding, keep young people at that metric of serving them to the best of our abilities, and getting past all the obstacles. We know right now why things can't work. We could all make a list of questions about why things fell apart and why we know that. And there are people in our field who've already figured it out. So we can get past it. And then let's keep our young people top of mind and making sure their experiences is what they deserve.
Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, programs that all our kids should go to. I mean, I think that is a really, really excellent summary. Before I close this out, I have a couple closing thoughts. Autrilla, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but there's a question in the chat. Can you speak briefly, a summary of how would you explain what backwards planning is? No,
Okay.
we'll close that out. Thank you.
No worries. So establish your goals. So if your goal is, let's choose summer activism. If your goal is that by the end of the summer, I want my students to be informed and I want them to feel empowered to make changes in their community. So if that's your goal, then how do you get there? And so then you start to plan backwards. How do we get there? So it may be that the first week, you put students in little focus groups and you allow them to talk about the issues that are in their community. You allow them to talk about the things that concern them that they've maybe seen on the news. Maybe allow them to vote and narrow it down on the top 3 and then put them in groups and then craft learning experiences for them over the course of your summer program. So if I'm in a group that's worried about, and I've done this with my students, I had a school in South Central that was concerned because there were no real healthy food places or there were no major grocery stores, but on every single block, there was a fast food restaurant. And so they did research. So week 1 for them was researching what stores are in our community, what stores did we have that closed. Week 2 was looking at health issues that dominate the area. So high blood pressure, diabetes, those types of things. Week 3, what can we do about it? What resources would we need? And so they came up with, they created a community garden there at school. And so their plan was, we need seeds, we need fertilizer, we need these things. And their goal with that was that, okay, we'll have these available fruits and vegetables. And every Friday, students can stop by this garden and they can take fruits and they can take vegetables home so that they do have access to something healthy to eat over the weekend before they come back. And literally the garden is still there at this campus, but that was us working backwards. So this is the problem. What would be a foreseeable solution? And their solution was people would have access to healthy foods. Okay, how are you going to get there? So do some research, do some background, come up with a plan, and then tell me what you need to make it happen. So that's how you work backwards. Start with the plan, and then how do you get there? Okay.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for that crash course of backwards plan. That's really helpful, really specific examples. Cool. Thank you all so much for spending part of your Friday with us. Just open our minds and our perspectives around what is the opportunity this summer and how do we make the best of it? How do we lay the groundwork now for what we want to see in the future? So thank you for the participants for coming, for contributing your expertise and your questions, your experiences in the chat. I hope you heard some framing and strategies, like a lot of strategies that will help you think about supporting students and families this summer and into the future. And yeah, I want to thank the panelists for your contributions and for the good work that you all are doing and for the creativity and insight that you shared. And yeah, I mean, in closing, it sounds like this summer's gonna be a fun one, like especially if you're in one of the programs here, right? Like I think I just really want to highlight that the need for fun and playfulness and joy and connection, to acknowledge what happened in the past year and like the hurt and the loss also, and making space for kids to feel connected and joyful, and helping them in that lifelong process of holding both of those things. So thank you for such a informative time, and I just really appreciate you all for making the time to be here.